Good morning and welcome to the Blood Red channel as we're here for the quarter-final and semi-final draws of the Champions League as Liverpool await their fate in the tournament. I'm Guy Clarke, alongside me, Matt Addison. And Matt, well, we know just how important the Champions League is to Liverpool, and all eyes on the draw today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to have a huge impact on what happens for the rest of this season. I think if Liverpool can get themselves a nice draw, it gives everyone something to look forward to. And, even if they get, one of the bigger boys that you probably want to avoid, I think it's, it's obviously a massive competition that we know all the history and everything that goes with it with Liverpool. And yeah, it's always exciting. I think it's fantastic that, even given the season and the problems that Liverpool have had, they are in this draw, and they're probably one of the teams that a few of the other teams are probably looking at and thinking they probably don't want either, even given the situation we know with the injuries and centre backs and what have you. But yeah, very much looking forward to it this morning.
No, certainly. So open draw, of course, in the quarter-final stage of the Champions League. So Liverpool can draw any of the sides left in the hat. Borussia Dortmund, Porto, Real Madrid, reigning champions Bayern Munich, PSG, Chelsea, and Manchester City. So 3 English sides in the hat. But Matt, I suppose all eyes are going to be on Porto, aren't they? They're the side Liverpool will be so desperate to draw.
Yeah, that's the team, isn't it? That every single club in this competition will want. I think they're the ones that you'd have to make Liverpool outright favourites. I think all the others, there's a case to be made for Liverpool maybe not being favourites. I think with someone like Borussia Dortmund, it's probably closer to 50-50 given the quality of Erling Haaland and that sort of thing. But I think Porto, you'd have to say that is quite comfortably, I think, that the best draw for Liverpool to get. That's the one that everyone will be hoping for. And for one team, that is going to be the case. For the others, I think there's a difficult sort of opponent to come. But at this stage of the competition, obviously, you can't pick and choose who you get, and it's more likely that, of course, Liverpool will get somebody else. And if they do, it's going to be a fantastic tie. So whatever happens, I think Liverpool will have some hope of going through. But I think probably you want to save these bigger ties for later down in the competition. And if Liverpool could get Porto, you'd fancy them then to get to the semi-final. And who knows, once you're into a semi-final over 2 legs, I think Liverpool are capable of beating any of these teams in the competition. So yeah, very much one to watch out for, I think, Porto. But I would suggest that maybe it won't just be Liverpool who are wanting them.
Yeah, if you want to let us know who you want Liverpool to draw in the comments section, we will try and get as many of your comments on screen as we possibly can. Porto, maybe then the dream draw, Matt. Who's the team to avoid in this scenario for Liverpool?
I think there's a few, to be honest. I think that the English clubs, I would not want to get them. I think the Champions League is all about playing someone different, freshening it up, getting a trip abroad, a trip away for these players. I think would be a good thing. But even when you look abroad, there's obviously some fantastic clubs. I think all of them, as I say, will be difficult. But you look at say a Real Madrid, maybe they wouldn't be the worst draw in the world. But a Bayern Munich, a PSG, that would be a really tough task. I think given the injury problems and so on and so forth that Liverpool have had, particularly at centre back. I think you'd probably fancy Liverpool against any of these teams if they had Van Dijk and they had Gomez and all of the options that they have in those areas. But yeah, the fact that they've not got those players, you potentially could be a little bit concerned about a Lewandowski or an Mbappe or a Neymar. All of these big names are names that you expect to come up against at this point in the competition. But yeah, I think that would be a tough ask for Liverpool. I think for me, Bayern Munich are still the favourites. Obviously, they've gone all the way last season. They've still got, for me, the best player in the world, Robert Lewandowski, at this moment in time. The goals that he provides, I think they're probably the team to avoid if you had to pick out one. But yeah, there's certainly several there that you'd think probably would be, putting Liverpool as underdogs if they were to come up against them. That's obviously, we've seen them go all the way in Istanbul in the past being underdogs. It wouldn't be the end of the world if they got a bigger team. But yeah, I think Bayern would be the favourites for me at this stage in the competition.
Yeah, well, Chelsea, of course, Liverpool, bar Chelsea, have got a lot of pedigree with these sides in the Champions League over even the last few years, even not just the Champions League, but the Europa League. You think Dortmund 5 years ago when Jurgen Klopp had come in the Europa League, beating them. Porto, of course, the recent history. Bayern Munich, only a couple of years ago now in the last 16, PSG in the group stage, of course, and Manchester City, too, en route to reaching the final in Kiev as well. A lot of people commenting, Matt, about Real Madrid and that there is revenge maybe to be had there for 2018. And I suppose there wouldn't be a better time to sort of get Real Madrid as the draw is just getting underway. Like Liverpool, maybe. Real Madrid not the strongest right now.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, I watched them against Atalanta and they weren't massively impressive. They've obviously got good individuals. They've got good players. Karim Benzema, I think, is a very underrated player even now. And he would pose a huge threat, I think, to a depleted Liverpool backline, but they're not the team that they once were. They're certainly not the same team that they were in 2018 when they beat Liverpool in that final. They've still obviously got Sergio Ramos, and the narratives around that, I'm sure, would be huge going into a game with them, but I think they wouldn't be the worst draw in the world. I think you'd certainly prefer them to Manchester City, Chelsea, PSG, Bayern Munich. I think I'd put Real Madrid certainly ahead of those in the pecking order for who you'd want to draw in this competition. So it would be an interesting one. I think if Liverpool were to have Real Madrid, that's almost an ideal draw in a sense of being able to look forward to a huge game and a huge tie over two legs. But equally, you'd probably put Liverpool sort of 50-50 in terms of going through. So that wouldn't be the worst draw in the world. I think that would be certainly a higher preference. It would certainly be in the group of two or three that I prefer from a Liverpool perspective. But yeah, look, there's no easy games at this stage of the competition. And Real Madrid, we know their pedigree and what they can do. They are a very, very difficult team to play against. And you wouldn't take anything for granted, of course. But yeah, after Porto and Borussia Dortmund, I think Real Madrid probably would be the third team that I'd quite like Liverpool to come up against.
Yeah, and that's one of the crucial elements to today that we need to keep an eye on all of the quarter-final ties, because immediately afterwards we have the semi-final draw as well to see who Liverpool would then be facing. And I suppose maybe, I think Jurgen Klopp will probably be looking at the competition anyway. He said it after the Leipzig game, you're in a competition to win it. But I suppose today's draw really will go a long way to indicate as to which of the two competitions, the Premier League or Champions League, the Reds might just sort of focus on.
Yeah, exactly. Getting into the Champions League next season is going to come in one of two ways. It's either by winning this competition or getting into the top four. And I think if Liverpool were to draw one of the big boys, you then maybe think, certainly if Chelsea was to sort of get an easier draw, maybe that would tip the balance in terms of the league in favour of Liverpool. I think it will come down to Liverpool or Chelsea to get into that top four in the Premier League. So I think there's a couple of different ways of looking at it. I think we have to look, obviously, first and foremost at the team that Liverpool get, but the implications are going to be quite significant, I think, in terms of the other sort of English teams and who they get. And in terms of the Champions League itself, it's going to be interesting to see who some of these big teams get. If Bayern Munich were to draw Paris Saint-Germain, for example, that would knock out one of the two favourites for the competition. So, yeah, loads of plenty of different sort of things to look at. And I think there's obviously, probably more teams that you'd probably not want to face than face. But, that is the luck of the draw, essentially, isn't it? Sometimes you need that luck to go in your favour. And if Liverpool's name could potentially be on number 7 at the end of this season, I think, the draw is going to play a key role in that.
Yeah, the draw is just about to be getting underway. A recap then on the sides who are in the quarterfinal. The last 8 of the Champions League: Liverpool, Borussia Dortmund, Porto, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, PSG, Chelsea, and Manchester City. So those are the quarterfinalists. And
just coming out of the hat now, Manchester City, the first ball to be drawn out of the hat. So certainly, I think one for Liverpool to try and avoid if they can.
Yeah, well, of course, there is history in this stage between Liverpool and Manchester City as well. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But all eyes, of course, waiting to see who Liverpool will draw. But Manchester City, the first name out of the hat, and they will play Borussia Dortmund.
So it's a very favourable tie, I think, for Manchester City. It's certainly not a bad one. I think that's certainly one that Guardiola would have taken. It's not Porto, which is a good thing for Liverpool, but yeah, I think Manchester City would be heavy favourites for that one, I think you'd say, even with Erling Haaland. So an interesting one. Porto, actually, the next team out of the hat. So I think there'll be a few fingers being crossed for Liverpool in this one. Let's see who comes out of the hat. Porto, the team.
Yeah, very interesting. Man City v Dortmund, of course. Jadon Sancho narratives there. Also, Erling Haaland being linked with a move to Manchester City as well as Liverpool. So interesting there. Porto then will play.
Chelsea have got Porto. So
the two sides Liverpool were praying for.
Two very favourable draws, I think, for the English team. So, next ball just being drawn out now. But Liverpool, of course, still in the hat, and some big teams for them to face. Bayern Munich is the next one out of the hat. So
we can surmise that best case scenario is gone for Liverpool, both Dortmund and Porto out of the hat, but also won't be drawing an English side, of course.
Yeah, that's the positive you take, isn't it? I mean, it's going to be one of Bayern, PSG or Real Madrid. So some big ties for Liverpool to look forward to. Just about to open up the ball now. Paris Saint-Germain. So it is Real Madrid for Liverpool.
So it's a repeat of last year's Champions League final between Munich and PSG in the last 8, and Liverpool will play Real Madrid. We're just obviously waiting, of course, on just confirmation of that. But Matt, Real Madrid, we had people in comments sort of talking about a revenge mission against Madrid, and that is what it's going to be in the last 8.
Yeah, all the narratives, all the stories that we can now write for that taking place. Real Madrid have just come out of the hat. So Liverpool actually were the 8th team out of 8 to come out of that. I think that will determine which leg takes place first, won't it? I'm not 100% sure on that. But it's a huge game. It's a huge tie. Revenge is going to be a word that's going to get used a hell of a lot, I think, over the next few weeks. But yeah, Liverpool, Real Madrid obviously comes with the prestige. It comes with everything else on that. And I think as I said, just before the draw took place, I think Borussia Dortmund and Porto were probably, the ideal draws for Liverpool to get. But Real Madrid was probably the one after that. I think certainly Man City, Chelsea, Bayern, PSG, you wouldn't have fancied them over Real Madrid. So I think Liverpool have just about got onto the favourable side of that draw, you'd say, in terms of the teams that they face. And obviously all eyes now coming on to, which teams and potentially if Liverpool were to get through against Real Madrid, which sides would they face in a possible semi-final. So yeah, still a little bit to be decided in this Champions League draw. We're sort of halfway there, aren't we, in terms of finding out which teams. It's now about the order and the rest of this competition, which I think is, to be honest, equally as important. Obviously, you need to have a slightly favourable draw in terms of who you're coming up against, but I think you need a favourable route to the final as well, potentially. But you'd imagine Chelsea and Manchester City would probably get through in their ties. Bayern Munich, Paris Saint-Germain is a bit of a toss-up between the two who would get through there. So there's going to be no easy semi-finals, that is for sure. And of course, Liverpool have to get through their quarter-final first. But at this stage of the competition, you are starting to dream, aren't you? You're starting to look ahead and plot that route to Istanbul. So yeah, certainly a few things to watch out for. And they're just at the moment deciding which teams will be facing each other in the semi-finals. Yeah,
the semi-final draw beginning to get underway. We'll be keeping an eye on that. I just wonder, so quarter-final 3 is come out first. That's Bayern and Paris Saint-Germain, isn't it, Matt?
Yep, and they will face either Manchester City or Borussia Dortmund. Some huge ties in that one.
So it's either Porto or Chelsea in the last 4 if Liverpool can get past Real Madrid. So let's just stay on briefly and just chat about sort of the eventualities, the ramifications that have come out of the draw. Then I would go as far to say, Matt, maybe that Real Madrid in the quarters and then Porto or Chelsea in the last 4 is probably the best Liverpool could have got, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not far off, is it? I think you'd have wanted one of those lesser teams before Real Madrid and maybe you've had it the other way around. But it's really not too bad a draw for Liverpool in terms of that route to the final. It's really, not a bad one at all. Liverpool are the first team out of the hat in terms of the semi-finals. So again, that will determine the order of those legs taking place potentially if they can get through against Real Madrid. I mean, yeah, it just brings back memories, doesn't it? It's all of the Chelsea semi-finals and all sorts of things en route to Istanbul. And yeah, I mean, it's all falling into place, isn't it, for Liverpool? I think that's, you can never pick and choose. You can never predict these things. You can never predict these draws. But I think Liverpool, generally looking at that draw, I think they would take that. I think if you'd have offered that to Jurgen Klopp and his players at the start of today, I think they'd have absolutely taken it. I think, certainly I would have done. I think, to get Real Madrid, you sort of look at it and your initial reaction is obviously partly the narrative and the revenge. But I think if you actually look at their team and the state that they're in at this moment in time, it's far from perfect. Obviously, you can say the same for Liverpool. I think, it's probably 50-50 in terms of who gets through in that. But then, Chelsea, if we assume that Chelsea get through against Porto, I think they probably will. I mean, Chelsea, Liverpool, I think that's, for a semi-final, it's not too bad. Whoever you're going to get in a semi-final is going to be very, very difficult. You'd imagine it would be Manchester City and then Bayern or PSG if it wasn't Chelsea. So they're, probably out of those three options, Chelsea is probably the favourable one. But yeah, I mean, it's all fallen into place. I think a lot of Liverpool fans will be very, very happy indeed with that.
Well, as you say on screen, we got a number of comments and a lot of people very, very excited indeed. Let's recap the draw then. So in the quarterfinals, it's Manchester City v Dortmund, Porto v Chelsea, Bayern Munich v PSG, and Real Madrid v Liverpool. And then for the semi-finals, Real Madrid v Liverpool against Porto, or the winner of their game with Chelsea, and then Bayern Munich or PSG against Manchester City or Borussia Dortmund. It has very much gone Liverpool's way. We've been waiting for the fortunes to change this season, Matt. What about the significance of playing that first quarter-final away? Maybe chance to get some away goals and then a home tie. And then, of course, in the last four, it's kind of anyone's, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think the order of the ties, they're always important. It's always, a chance to get those away goals on the board. We saw that in the game with RB Leipzig. Obviously, Liverpool moving, in front in that one, being able to defend that lead that they got. But I suppose it's not quite as important without fans in the stadium. Potentially, we don't know where necessarily these ties will take place. I don't know, in terms of the pandemic and the regulations in terms of travelling to Spain and things like that. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head how that will pan out. Things again could change between now and that date of the tie taking place. So I think that's probably not as important as it would have been in previous seasons and that sort of thing. But you take any sort of glimmer of hope that you can, don't you, of Liverpool getting a little bit of an advantage. And I'm sure that's something that they'll be thinking about, as I say, not potentially as much as what they might have been in previous seasons, but yeah, I think that the more important thing was to get a decent draw, to be on the right side of the draw. And both of those things, really, for Liverpool, you have to say, have happened.
Is it 2005 Istanbul happening all over again? You alluded to it before, but a European giant in the quarters. Back then it was Juventus, now it's Real Madrid, and potentially Chelsea coming to Anfield in the last four before an Istanbul final.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the narrative writes itself, doesn't it? It's weird how these things happen. Obviously, we've known that the final was going to be in Istanbul for a little while now, and that's obviously something that's always going to be synonymous with Liverpool and all that sort of Champions League history and all of that sort of thing. I think it does sort of feel a little bit like this has fallen into place for Liverpool. We know how wrong it's gone up until this point for Liverpool in the season. They've started potentially now to turn a corner. Maybe we'll get one or two players back from injury over the next few weeks. And, this is a tie to absolutely savour. And if Liverpool can, get through, you really do fancy them to get to the final. And, as we've seen in the past, once you get to a final, who knows what can happen. So, yeah, I think for Liverpool fans, it's an opportunity now to start dreaming. It's an opportunity to start planning ahead and having, a few key dates in the diary. And that's what you're in the Champions League for. This is why it's so important that Liverpool get back into the Champions League next season, because, draws like this, the excitement that it brings, the big teams that you're coming up against and all that sort of thing. It's absolutely huge for the football club, obviously financially and off the pitch, but more than that, I think it's huge for fans to have things like this to look forward to. And obviously there'll be no fans inside the stadium. It's a huge shame. It would have been, a brilliant away trip for all those that were able to travel over there. It would have been fantastic to welcome Real Madrid to Anfield, and I'm sure the atmosphere would have been absolutely electric for that. But that obviously won't be the case. But we've got the next best thing. We know that these matches will take place, and I think Liverpool have got, at least a fighting chance of getting through. And once they get through, as I keep saying, who knows what can happen? It's time to start dreaming, I think.
It may well be time to start dreaming. That's it from us here then on the Blood Red channel. A Ramos revenge mission for the Reds in the offing. Salah and co looking to plot the glory to number 7 for Liverpool. From myself, Guy Clarke, and Matt Addison, thanks for joining us. We'll be back later with the Blood Red podcast here on the Blood Red YouTube channel and wherever it is you get your audio on demand. But for now, thanks for your time and your company. It's bye for now.